The wind whipping off Lake Michigan was biting enough to freeze breath, but it had nothing on the glacial chill inside the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel. Outside, Chicago was a flurry of white snow and red taillights, a chaotic symphony of last-minute Christmas shoppers. Inside, however, the air was still and heavy, scented with fresh pine needles, expensive beeswax candles, and the distinct metallic tang of old money. Evelyn Vance stood near the heavy velvet drapes of the entrance, her hand subconsciously tightening around the simple leather clutch tucked under her arm. It was a modest accessory, devoid of logos or sequins, much like her midnight blue gown that flowed softly to the floor. To the untrained eye, she looked plain amidst the sea of shimmering diamonds and gold lame. But Evelyn wasn't here to sparkle. She was here to decide the fate of a $900 million empire. She declined the flute of champagne offered by a passing waiter, preferring to keep her senses sharp. She watched the room with the quiet intensity of a hawk circling a field. In the center of the ballroom, under the colossal crystal chandelier, the Sterling family held court. Beatrice Sterling, the matriarch, laughed loudly at a joke that wasn't funny, her neck draped in enough pearls to anchor a small boat. Near the buffet, a young server named Marcus struggled with a heavy silver tray loaded with empty crystal glasses. He was young, perhaps barely 20, and the terror in his eyes was visible from across the room as the tray wobbled dangerously. A floor manager took a step toward him, mouth open to scold, but Evelyn moved first. She didn't rush, yet she covered the distance with a fluid grace. As she passed Marcus, she caught his eye and gave him a warm, steady nod, a silent message that said, "Breathe. You're doing fine." The boy's shoulders dropped an inch, the panic subsiding just enough for him to stabilize the tray and slip into the kitchen. Evelyn retreated to the shadow of a marble pillar near the service doors, checking her phone. The screen glowed with a message from her legal team. "Papers are ready on your signal." She looked up, her expression unreadable. Beatrice Sterling had stopped laughing. She was squinting across the room, her gaze bypassing the guests and landing squarely on Evelyn. Beatrice didn't see a CEO. She didn't see a potential partner. She saw a black woman in a plain dress standing near the kitchen, and her prejudice filled in the rest of the blanks. Beatrice raised a diamond-encrusted hand and snapped her fingers sharply in Evelyn's direction. "You there," Beatrice's voice cut through the jazz like breaking glass. "Don't just stand around. Be useful and clear this table." Beatrice just made a grave mistake judging Evelyn by her cover. If you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their dress, drop the number 8 in the comments to show your support for Evelyn. And before we see how she handles this insult, make sure to subscribe to Black Brilliance and hit that notification bell. We are building a community where dignity always shines. Now, let's see what happens next. There is a specific kind of heavy silence that falls over a party when the wealthy decide to hunt for sport. It rippled outward from the Sterling's table, silencing the nearby chatter more effectively than a gavel. Evelyn didn't flinch at the snap of Beatrice's fingers. Instead, she adjusted the clutch under her arm and walked slowly toward the VIP table, her movements deliberate and calm. She wasn't obeying a command. She was investigating a crime scene before it happened. The table was a monument to excess, centered around a melting ice sculpture of the Sterling Industries logo, dripping water onto the white tablecloth like sweat. Beatrice pointed a manicured finger at a cluster of empty crystal flutes. "Well, we've been waiting. The service here is usually impeccable, but tonight it seems standards are slipping." Evelyn stopped a few feet away, her gaze level. She didn't reach for the glasses. She simply looked at the woman and asked, her voice low and cultured, "I beg your pardon?" Before Beatrice could answer, a younger man slumped in the chair next to her let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Julian Sterling, the heir apparent, looked like a man who had never been told no in his 30 years of life. His face was flushed with expensive scotch, and his tie was loosened just enough to look sloppy. "You heard my mother," Julian sneered, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Refill the glasses. Or do you need a translation? I know finding good help is hard these days, but surely you can manage a simple pour." From the periphery, Marcus, the young server Evelyn had smiled at earlier, saw what was happening. His eyes went wide with horror. He knew who the guests were, and he knew the danger of embarrassed billionaires, But he couldn't just watch. He rushed forward, nearly tripping in his haste. "Mr. Sterling, sir." "Please excuse me," Marcus stammered, stepping between Evelyn and the table, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for a bottle. "I think there's a mistake. This lady, she isn't staff. She's a goo." "Quiet, boy," Julian barked, cutting him off with a wave of his hand that was dismissive enough to be a slap. "Don't speak unless spoken to, or you're fired before you can finish that sentence." The word boy hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The jazz band seemed to fade into the background noise of clinking silverware. Evelyn's expression, previously one of detached observation, hardened into steel. She stepped past Marcus, placing herself directly in Julian's line of sight, shielding the young man with her own presence. "You will not speak to him that way," Evelyn said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the candles flicker. "He is doing his job with more professionalism than you are showing as a guest. Dignity is free, Mr. Sterling, even if you can't afford it." The insult landed. Julian blinked, stunned that the help was lecturing him. The shock quickly curdled into rage. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping harsh and loud against the marble floor. Julian stood up, towering over her, his face flushing red. "I don't need lectures from the help. I need my drink poured. Now." Arrogance is a funny thing. It blinds a man so completely that he doesn't see the cliff until he's already falling. A high-pitched screech of microphone feedback tore through the tense atmosphere, momentarily silencing the standoff at table 5. On the raised stage at the front of the ballroom, a spotlight snapped on, bathing Richard Sterling in a halo of white light. He looked every inch the titan of industry, beaming with a confidence that was entirely unearned. He tapped the microphone twice, oblivious to the fact that his son was currently trying to intimidate a woman less than 30 feet away. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice boomed, amplified by the speakers, echoing off the high ceilings. "Thank you for joining us on this snowy Christmas Eve. Tonight isn't just a celebration of the season. It is a celebration of the future. I am proud to announce that Sterling Industries is finalizing a historic partnership." He paused for effect, spreading his arms wide. "A $900 million strategic alliance with Vance Logistics." Thunderous applause erupted. The room vibrated with the sound of wealthy palms striking together. Richard continued, his voice thick with pride. "Our partner, the elusive and brilliant CEO of Vance Logistics, is a visionary. Though she prefers privacy, her capital will fuel our growth for decades." On the floor, in the shadows cast by the dazzling stage lights, Julian turned back to Evelyn. The irony was so thick it was suffocating, yet he missed it entirely. He gestured toward the stage with his glass, a smirk twisting his lips. "You hear that?" he hissed, leaning in close so only she could hear over the clapping. "That's real power. That is a $900 million deal. Something people like you only dream about while washing our dishes." Evelyn didn't look at the stage. She kept her eyes locked on Julian, her expression unmoving, like a statue carved from obsidian. The applause was reaching a crescendo, a roaring wave of approval for a deal that was currently standing in front of Julian Sterling, being treated like dirt. Julian, emboldened by the noise and his father's success, decided to deliver one final humiliation. He plucked a soggy, cocktail-stained napkin from the table. It was crumpled and wet. With a sneer, he thrust it toward Evelyn's chest. "Here," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Since you're standing there doing nothing, make yourself useful and throw this away." He let go. The napkin didn't land in her hand. Evelyn didn't move a muscle to catch it. It fluttered down between them, landing on her shoe, a wet, pathetic symbol of his disdain. The disrespect was absolute. She wasn't just staff to him. She was invisible as a human being. Slowly, deliberately, Evelyn reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a tray. She didn't pull out a rag. She pulled out her phone, the screen lighting up her face in the dim room. The applause was just starting to die down, leaving a pocket of silence around them. She held the phone up, the screen glowing against her skin. "You're right, Julian," she said, her voice cutting through the applause. "It is a lot of money. Far too much to give to trash." Evelyn just called them trash to their faces, and the real power move is about to begin. If you are ready to see justice served cold, please comment the number 3 below to let me know you are watching. And if you haven't yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black Brilliance and hit that notification bell. Your support allows us to keep telling stories where dignity wins. Now, let's watch the takedown. Some phone calls change your plans for the evening. Others change your entire life in the span of a heartbeat. The ballroom, which had been vibrating with applause just moments ago, fell into a confused hush. The clapping died out unevenly, like rain stopping on a tin roof, as guests noticed the confrontation near the stage. The jazz band lowered their instruments, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. Evelyn didn't look at the crowd. She tapped the screen of her phone once, her movement precise and final, and pressed the speaker icon. The device was small, but in the sudden silence of the room, it felt like a grenade with the pin pulled. "David, are you there?" Evelyn asked, her voice calm, projecting clearly without shouting. A crisp, professional voice boomed from the tiny speaker, cutting through the stagnant air. "Yes, Ms. Vance. I have the legal team on standby as requested. Are we proceeding with the announcement?" Evelyn held the phone up, locking eyes with Julian, whose smirk was beginning to falter at the edges. "No, David. Change of plans. Terminate the Sterling merger immediately. Pull the funding. All of it. Cite unethical conduct and brand misalignment as the cause." "Understood." The voice replied instantly, the sound of typing audible in the background. "Drafting the termination notice now. The press release will go out in 5 minutes." Julian blinked, his brain struggling to process the information. He let out a sharp, nervous laugh that sounded too loud in the quiet room. "Nice performance, lady," he scoffed, looking around for validation from his friends. "Who is that on the other end? Your boyfriend pretending to be a lawyer? You really think you can scare us with a—" "Shut up." The scream didn't come from Evelyn. It came from the stage. Richard Sterling was scrambling down the stairs, nearly tripping over his own tuxedo trousers in his haste. His face, previously flushed with pride, was now the color of old ash. He pushed through the crowd, shoving guests aside, his eyes wide with a terrifying recognition. He reached the table and grabbed Julian by the shoulder, shaking him violently. "Shut up, you fool," Richard hissed, his voice trembling with panic. "That voice, that isn't an actor. I've spent 6 months on conference calls with that man. That is David Ross, the head of legal for Vance Logistics." Julian froze. The glass in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor, but no one flinched. The sound of the breaking glass was the only punctuation mark the moment needed. The arrogance drained out of Julian's face, replaced by a dawning, sickly horror. Richard turned slowly to face the woman he had ignored all evening. He looked at the plain dress, the sensible clutch, and then up into eyes that held more authority than everyone in the room combined. His hands shook as he reached out, as if trying to touch a ghost. "Ms. Vance," Richard whispered, the name choking him. You are Evelyn Vance." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely deafening, the sound of a dynasty crumbling. Every eye in the room was fixed on the small group near the ice sculpture. Guests who had previously been whispering and giggling were now holding their phones high, capturing every frame of the disaster in 4K resolution. The flashing lights from the cameras reflected off the melting ice, creating a chaotic strobe effect that made Richard Sterling look even paler. Evelyn lowered her phone slowly, slipping it back into her clutch with the same deliberate grace she had used all evening. She looked at Richard, then at the trembling Julian, and finally at Beatrice, whose pearls seemed to be choking her. Evelyn said softly. Her voice wasn't raised, yet it carried to the back of the room. "And I have seen enough tonight to know that Vance Logistics does not do business with this family." Beatrice Sterling let out a strangled gasp. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. The lifestyle, the status, the future she had promised her friends, all evaporating because of a few cruel words. She stepped forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Oh, Evelyn. Ms. Vance, surely there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We didn't know." Her voice pitched up into a desperate whine. "If we had known it was you, dear, we would have treated you like royalty. We would have rolled out the red carpet." Evelyn's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew colder. She took a step closer to Beatrice, invading the woman's personal space just as Julian had invaded hers. "That is the problem, Mrs. Sterling," Evelyn said, her tone cutting deep. "You shouldn't need a title or a bank account to treat a human being with dignity. Character isn't defined by how you treat CEOs. It is defined by how you treat the people you think can do nothing for you." Evelyn turned slightly and gestured toward Marcus. The young server was standing frozen near the buffet, his tray forgotten, staring at Evelyn with wide, awe-filled eyes. "You called that young man boy," Evelyn continued, her voice hardening. "You treated him like dirt because he served you. You treated me like trash because you assumed I was below you. You showed me exactly who you are when you thought no one important was watching." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the family like a shroud. "My money does not support bigotry, and my company does not partner with bullies." Richard opened his mouth to argue, to beg, to offer some excuse about stress or alcohol, but the sound of 100 camera shutters clicking at once drowned out his thoughts. The court of public opinion had already reached a verdict. Phones flashed like lightning around them. "The deal is dead, Richard," Evelyn whispered, loud enough for the nearest camera to catch every syllable. "And the world is watching you bury it. Dignity is not something you can buy with a check. It is something you carry in your soul, no matter what you wear." Evelyn turned away from the Sterling family, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own arrogance. The ballroom, once a fortress of exclusion, now parted for her like the Red Sea. Guests who had previously looked through her now stepped aside with hushed respect, their eyes following her every move. No one looked at Richard or Julian anymore. The cameras had captured their shame, and now the audience was done with them. The Sterlings were already becoming yesterday's news, trapped in a viral loop of their own making. Evelyn walked toward the exit, her head held high, not in pride, but in peace. Near the heavy double doors, Marcus was still standing, clutching his empty tray like a shield. He looked at her, unsure if he should speak, but his eyes were filled with a gratitude that words couldn't hold. Evelyn stopped. The crowd behind her held its breath, wondering if she had one more insult to deliver. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored business card. She held it out to the young man with a gentle smile. "You have good instincts, Marcus," she said, her voice warm enough to melt the lingering tension in his shoulders. "And you have courage. Those are things I cannot teach, but I can hire." Marcus took the card with trembling hands, staring at the embossed logo of Vance Logistics. "Ms. Vance, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll finish your degree," Evelyn replied softly. "Then call that number. My company needs men with integrity. We have a spot waiting for you." She didn't wait for a thank you. She gave him a final nod and pushed through the doors, stepping out of the suffocating perfume of the ballroom and into the crisp, clean air of the Chicago night. The wind off the lake was cold, but it felt refreshing against her skin, scrubbing away the toxicity of the evening. Snow was falling softly, blanketing the city in silence. Her driver, an older man named Henry who had been with her for 10 years, opened the rear door of the sedan. He took one look at her face and smiled. "Good evening, ma'am." "Or a long one." "A necessary one, Henry," Evelyn said, sliding into the warmth of the leather seat. "But it's over now." As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the Drake Hotel and the Sterlings behind in the rearview mirror, Evelyn checked her phone one last time. She didn't look at the news or the stock prices or the frantic emails flooding her inbox from Richard Sterling. She opened her messages and typed a text to her daughter. "Coming home, sweetie. It's going to be a peaceful Christmas." As the snow settled over Chicago that night, it didn't just cover the streets. It covered a chapter of arrogance that had finally come to an end. While the Sterlings were left in the cold of their own making, Evelyn found warmth not in her millions, but in the simple act of lifting a young man up. This story reminds us of a timeless truth. True legacy isn't written in bank statements or on the plaques of buildings. It is written in the quiet moments when we choose kindness over cruelty and respect over judgment. As Evelyn showed us, you never really know who you are speaking to, so treat the janitor with the same reverence as the CEO. Dignity is a quiet seed. Plant it everywhere you go, and you will always walk in a garden of peace. If Evelyn's quiet strength warmed your heart tonight, I invite you to join our growing family here at Black Brilliance. We tell these stories to remind the world that brilliance shines in every shade, and dignity is a language we all should speak. Please take a moment to subscribe and tap the notification bell. Leave a comment below sharing a time when you saw kindness win over prejudice. We'd love to read your story. Until next time, keep shining.